fix it. Got my mind spinning, I feel dizzy. Cause some people love, now they miss me. I've been feeling low, I gotta hit save, 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 save. I've been feeling low, I gotta hit save, 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 save. A little time on my mind, let me find my peace. Write a hook in a book and rewind the beat. Little time on my mind, let me find my peace. Write a hook in my book to rewind the beat. And rewind the beat, and rewind the beat.
Well, look at that, look at that. Round of applause for yourself and for that song. Hey, look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we are your hosts of the A.T.T.I.C.S podcast.
All the things I couldn't say.
Look at that, right off the bat, fresh off the press. That song you just heard was by my brother, Dejan Caldwell. You can find him at Dejan Caldwell on all streaming platforms. The song is called Find My Peace, which is quite fitting for what we are going to be doing with this here podcast. I am one of your hosts, one half of this dynamic duo. I'm Courtney, Ali Suggs, but most people know me as Courtney or Ali or Suggs. And what about yourself?
Just Shannon.
Yeah.
Or Finn or Shan. Shan Charlotte. Shannon Finnis.
Yes.
You can call me Shannon.
And so, Shannon, this is our time to shine, I guess. Yeah. This is where we want to start hitting on topics. So, I guess, A.T.T.I.C.S, you want to tell people how to spell, how to start, how a conception of it?
Yeah. First, shout out to FOP North Carolina Lodge 9 for letting us use
Round of applause
space.
For the FOP number 9.
Yeah, and let's just a little disclaimer, a little intro before we get really started into this. Right. So we are brand new to this podcast game. We don't know what the fuck we're doing.
Not even the slightest clue. Like, this is day number 1, try number 1.
Yep, we're just gonna see how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. So there's a lot of podcasts out there, a lot of cop-led ones, but I think we're gonna offer a more unique approach to that.
Indeed.
Indeed. You know, we'll tackle a lot of issues facing policing, not just police, but first responders, military, family, and society, because that's a big mess right now.
Who are you telling?
Yeah, so all the things I couldn't say are addicts. So that was an idea formed after I left the police department earlier this year.
And we will talk about that.
Yep. I got the idea from a former employee that left to go to another department. There was like a little time when a bunch of people just jumped ship. But he went to another department not too far from here, and he was nicknamed the abused child. The abused child. I guess some departments are different. Some people are, they take care of their people. Some don't. And I guess he was pretty much afraid to do anything, like didn't want to get in trouble for breathing wrong. So they joked and gave him that nickname. But shout out to him, because I had posted something about all the things I couldn't say, and he literally put up the acronym A.T.T.I.C.S. was like genius.
Yes,
right?
indeed.
Because when we talk about A.T.T.I.C.S, what do we put in the attic? It's like a storage place, right? And that's essentially our brain in our body, where we store a lot of shit in there, which we'll talk about too.
Indeed. Indeed.
So why we're here, why we're doing this, I left the department. A lot of people are afraid to speak out while you're in, to talk about things that we need, resources, all that kind of stuff. When you get out, you don't really have to fear those repercussions. So I was using social media to voice some of the concerns I had about things that were going on, and realized, hey, this is my personal page. And I'm getting all these friend requests, and a lot of people, I didn't know who they were, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So I started a blog instead, which then kind of morphed into a podcast with my brother Courtney. So we'll talk about a lot of stuff. But just a little disclaimer, we are not mental health professionals.
Not even the slightest.
We're not offering any advice. We kind of just speak from the heart and our own experiences, with the goal of improving culture and resources for all that sacrifice their mind, body, and soul for the profession in their communities. So with that being said, we will talk about some hard shit time to time.
Maybe some hard shit.
Some hard shit, yeah. May bring up something for you that's been bothering you, or something you want help with. You can always reach out to us. We're happy to help you find those resources. Please don't hold that in. We're going to cuss a lot. So if your kid's around, put some earbobs in, like Campbell says.
Viewer discretion is advised. Viewer discretion is advised.
We will definitely make you laugh.
Yeah, I am a part-time stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
I just haven't started my stand-up career yet. But
here's your platform.
Yeah.
We might make you cry with some of the folks we have on, some of the stories we'll tell.
Yep.
Might make you mad.
For sure, we'll do that.
Some people definitely won't agree with us, but that's life, right?
That's how it goes.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing about when you say addicts, it's a play on words, for one. The acronym, when you talk about the culture that we're in today, when you talk about policing or first responders, or shoot, even second responders to a degree, when you think like crime scene and people who are showing up that are still in the field, and medic, fire, and even branching off into other professions that deal with that, like the military, for example. So before you go
further, don't forget the redheaded stepchildren on the communications division.
Oh, yes,
animal control and
please,
corrections.
y'all don't hurt me. See, that's the
You're
problem.
gonna get mad.
Exactly. You see, that's the problem right now. And I think too, addicts is so fitting because society in general now, it's an addictive culture, right? You talk about being addicted to social media. You talk about being addicted to substances or working out or whatever hobby it is. Like, everybody finds their thing, and which, for better or for worse, put a lot into it, and how much is that benefiting you or taking away from you, especially when you talk about the culture of policing, the culture of being a first responder and things like that. So those are some of the things that we're going to be diving into. But before we, fully submerge ourselves underneath there, Shannon, let's talk to the people. Where are you from? What was your hood like? What's growing up with you? You know what I'm saying? What are things like? Oh, yes. Let's go. See, now all the things you couldn't say, now you can say them now. Huh? Look at that. Look at that. So tell the people where you from.
Originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He there, ho there, hi there. Yeah. I remember when I first started working, I was in Eastway on third shift, and when the guys knew I was from Minnesota, they wanted me to go to calls and talk like I was from Minnesota. Like, can you talk like you're from Fargo? I was like, Fargo's not in Minnesota. But like that show, you don't you know?
Don't you know?
But yeah, I'm from Minneapolis. I don't have a strong accent, I don't think. It comes out every once in a while.
Yeah, maybe. You've been down here, you're a transplant.
Yeah, but I don't think people... I guess Minneapolis is like Charlotte, because Charlotte doesn't really have an accent either.
Not even.
Because there's so many different types of folks there.
And we're a melting pot now. Most people who are in Charlotte are not even from Charlotte, so there's that.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
My hood, huh?
How was it?
17th and Lake Street, Phillips neighborhood.
Shout out Phillips. Hey, everybody give it up one time for Phillips. One time for Phillips.
No, I grew up... I'm old. I grew up in the 80s and 90s when Minneapolis was called Murderapolis, because we had a major influx of gangs from Chicago. So I saw a lot growing up. We had... Our garage was tagged quite frequently. We had Bloods, Crips, Vice Lords, all that good stuff. Gangster Disciples, GDs.
Okay, GDs.
So we had to paint the garage a lot.
Dang, that is how is that like? Well, before I even started, siblings?
Yeah, one brother, one sister, younger.
Both of them are younger?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, so you were head honcho.
I was in the neighborhood. I had gotten a lot of fights.
Oh, hey, shit, with the hands. Yeah. People don't try her.
I didn't start it, though.
Okay.
I just finished it.
Hey, see, that's how it goes. Try Jesus, don't try Shannon. You know what I'm saying?
I need that shirt.
All right, so that's what's up. Like, do you think your experiences and stuff led you to bringing yourself down here and things of that nature? Let's take it step by step. High school, college experience, hobbies. Growing up.
Basketball.
Oh, she's a hooper, ladies and gentlemen.
Grew up playing in my backyard. When it was snow outside, I was in the basement shooting at the ceiling. But I grew up playing ball, went to the local parks, played travel ball pretty much 6th grade up. We could be here all day talking about my life. Yeah. One of the jokes is that I've had so many lives because I've done so many things. But short story, played at a community college in Minneapolis, got a scholarship down here to North Carolina, Barton College, played basketball there.
Yeah.
After there, went to South Korea, taught English for a year.
That is so wild.
Learned how to say what is it? Kopajima, don't pick your nose. The kids would pick their nose and like put on. I always remember like the weird.
Yeah.
You know,
weird
like,
phrases.
I don't remember how to get around, but I can tell you not to pick your nose or fart. But yeah, I went back to Minnesota, went to grad school, started coaching basketball, high school, college. Ended up in Missouri, coaching basketball. Not a good experience there.
Oh, wow. We'll dive into that later on.
That's another story. And then found myself back in Charlotte and working for the police department here.
Wow. Look at you.
I got to meet you.
Yeah. Which is crazy in itself, yo. Like, you'd be surprised how many different people you talk to and you meet that have a similar story, but I would be hard pressed to find someone who's done the same. I've not yet to meet someone who's taught any type of language to anybody in a different country. So, well, we appreciate you sharing that. I guess I'll just touch on a little bit on your mans and where I come from.
Tell me about your hood, Courtney.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Greensboro shine, you know what I'm saying? We don't even talk like that in Greensboro, but I'm going to use that accent right now, baby. So Greensboro, NC, shout out 336. Originally, like, I'll make this joke, everybody knows wherever there's a Martin Luther King Boulevard in the city, that's where you can find the hood. I grew up right off of MLK, 817 Douglas Street to be exact. Shout out the East Side, but moved on up to the North Side, you know, and all things considered, you know, family dynamic was pretty similar to a lot of inner city kids. I actually will say this though, from perspective wise, I had my mom and dad and my little brother in the house till about the age of 10. So like, while all of my cousins, like, single parent homes or living with grandma or doing all that type of stuff, you know, granted, we still didn't have the most. We still had food stamps, still doing Section 8 stuff, still living in the hood. But I had both parents, which was different than what I was seeing around me. And then age of 10, all of that ceases to exist, you know, and then it's just mom and 2 boys. And it is a good bit of the reason why I am the way I am today, being the older sibling, you know what I mean? But yeah, growing up was, I would say no different than, you know, anything else that anybody else with a single parent household and experience. Anybody who can relate to that. Mom is working 2 jobs. You come home, cook for your little brother, make sure all the work is done. Try not to get in trouble yourself. You know what I mean? Trying to stay
Even though the
away
oldest kid is always the one that gets in trouble.
Easy.
And then the younger kids can do whatever they want.
Easy.
Right?
And my little brother will listen to this, so you can attest to that. Go ahead. Shout out to Christian. But yeah, ended up doing that. I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to have some people in my circle where we all kind of had like-minded ideas. You know, we're more so less into the street stuff, more into the playing ball, basketball, track, football. We all wanted to stay occupied year round because the flip side of it is I come from a family who, you know, people sell drugs and gangbang. And so it's like, that was my example growing up. Mm-hmm. The movie Paid in Full is what I always reference people to. Like, all of my older cousins, and there's a lot of us, my grandmother and grandfather had 7 kids, 13 grandkids, 24 great-grandkids, and then so forth and so on. So there's a lot of us. And more of the story is, a lot of those experiences led me to policing. Because growing up, I hated, you know, I wouldn't say hate it, but that was the common theme. Oh, we don't like the police. And
so how does that kind of transfer now because now you're Air Force, you're
Right.
a SWAT negotiator,
Right.
you're
Right.
a police officer. So what does your family think about you when you go back?
Man, so to skip forward a couple things, when I went to college, East Carolina University and UNC Charlotte, go Pirates, purple gold. And so I originally went to do medicine. My first love was medicine. I wanted to be a nurse, right? And I had the impression on me of a coach that I had playing football. He was SRO as well. And then another SRO came about, and they're like, yo, have you thought about policing? And so I said originally, like, nah, my family's not going to take to that. But I used to tell them when I went to school for criminal justice, and I told them, hey, I wanted to be a lawyer. That was the excuse that I used. And they're like, yeah, cuz, you can help us get out of trouble. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we got one in the family now. And I'm just like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I got y'all. And then one day I came back, and I'm like, look, I'm done with school, but I'm going into the police academy. And, a couple of my older male cousins sitting around chilling, talking, and it was kind of a pause, and I was like, yep, here you go. I'm not coming back to any of the family functions. Nobody invite me to the cookouts anymore, whatever. But they were like proud. It was like, hey man, we need somebody to give us perspective and provide that insight on what it's like, and they make jokes like, yeah, now we can really do what we want. And I'm like, listen, man, I'm not even staying in my hometown, decided to come to the police department, a different one in North Carolina, to be exact. So I said all that because I have been given a unique perspective on policing a culture, where there has seemingly always been a disconnect between the inner city, and I'm not even gonna say just black people in general, because we grew up with more than just black people, Latino, white, Asian, whatever. There's always different dynamics in these communities, but it has given me almost, I feel like, an advantage, while being on the street and stuff like that, doing patrol and, doing all different stuff, negotiating and stuff like that, because you can kind of immerse yourself into a lot of different situations when you have a diverse background. So those are experiences that I take now, and I use them day to day, because one, I'm still inside of the police culture. So, it is always ever evolving, ever changing. And we can get into a little bit as to how evolving and changing, because you have people that you meet, that you grow and you love, like my sister Shannon, and then they go on to do other endeavors. So you want to jump into why you left the police department?
Yeah, so I did about 10 years. Why did I leave?
Ooh, spicy.
I loved it, but I don't miss it. I thought I would miss it, and I really battled the last year. One, for a few reasons, really. Like, one, for the credit, right? Like, for what I'm going to talk about in a second, but would people respect me if I wasn't an officer anymore?
Right.
And then two, but the bigger one, just leaving my people. Like, I felt guilty, leaving people to still suffer in the midst of it. But essentially, I left to be able to help, because I couldn't help from the inside. And when I mean help, I'm working on getting my PhD in traumatology.
Shout out to PhD in traumatology, everybody. PhD, Dr. Shannon Fitness in the house.
In my last class right now, thank God. And then I'll start doing my research and stuff. But my goal is to really build programming and education for officers and first responders in general. Just, because we don't know a lot of stuff. Right. We don't know that. If you get sucked into this job and this culture and you're all police all day, and you never take that uniform on, don't sleep, you're going to die young. What is the statistics? 5 to 7 years after retirement, or 22 years less than the average civilian. But it's, the stress and the stuff that builds up in your attic and you're not letting out really impacts us. And being able to pass on that education and let people know that. And we tried to do that inside, and it got stopped. we had a command that really wasn't listening to the experts. And I'm not calling myself an expert. I'm talking about somebody else. But not well, and not even. And you know what? I am an expert because I do the job every day. Right. So
don't shortchange yourself. That's a fact.
If you're not listening to the people on the ground, you have no idea what's going on.
Right.
You have no idea what they need. And I think and we'll talk about leadership another time, but that's the biggest downfall of leadership in this profession is not really knowing what's going on or what your people need.
Right.
But essentially not being able to support internally is why I left, to find ways to do it externally, to cut through all the red tape and actually be able to provide resources and training and really help people because it's needed. You shouldn't do this job and not have the support to live a happy, healthy, successful life outside of the job.
So I'm thinking because when you say that, it makes me think about, all the people that we know in common, but just across America. And not only you talk about policing, like I said, we're talking about
teachers, nurses, firefighters,
all
military,
the way across the board. Like, what does it look like when you talk about support? In your perspective, what does it look like when you say, hey, you want people to feel supported in their work environment? What does that look like for you now that you're on the outside looking in? What is that vision? Because I assume it's the same, but now you have the different range to do what you want. So my question would be is what does that support piece look like for those who are in that predicament?
I mean, that brings us back to leadership. We're just good. I think we're always going to come back to leadership in a lot of these conversations that we have, because it's going to make or break. If you don't have the support internally, externally it doesn't matter as much. We'll talk about police community relations too and all this, but a lot of people are like, oh, I couldn't do that job. Everybody hates you and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, people are always going to hate the police.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, especially the folks that are getting locked up, right? They're more mad at themselves. They just don't know it.
Right.
But that's not always the biggest issue. The biggest issue is internally. I can't remember where the statistic came from, but it's the number one stressor for police internationally is internal. It's organizational. Internationally. So, and that's the same for teaching is so comparable right now to policing, the stuff that they're dealing with and the amount of people leaving, right now, you and I could go apply at a public school and go be teachers without a teacher's license because they don't have the bodies, and so it comes back to leadership support and really being there for your people and understanding what they need. And it's hard with this profession specifically because there's so many different facets, because then you got the courts and politics and the community, you know what I mean? And but if you have a leader that's willing to kind of fall on their sword, which is hard to find nowadays, and say, hey, these are my people, I'm going to put them first, and once I get them right, everything else is going to fall into place.
Yeah. I think let me give you another look that I think you have a good insight on as well. When you talk about also having support, right? What do you think when you talk about having that support? Because at the end of the day, I look at it like this. There's only but so much you can expect from a system, company, whomever, that has so many different tiers and layers to it, right? Because I look at it like the United States, the way the United States is run, right? Our structure is the president is one faction, but you got the Senate, you got the House, you have state, local, whatever, federal. So I'm saying all that to say, in my experience, one of the biggest helpers has been that peer-to-peer aspect, And I think even in the midst of dealing with whatever it is organizationally, that you're dealing with, I think having those peers, those people that you can kind of confide in, like whether it's your direct line supervisor, your sergeant, or you talk about just a senior person in your office, whether you're a teacher or, whatever, medic, one of those lead engine drivers for my guys that drag hoses.
And eat at 6, noon, and 6.
Yeah. Shout out
Cats
to them,
out of trees.
because I can tell you right now, there is no way I'm doing any type of fire.
Right.
Thing. I've been close enough to some burning cars, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and
call the fire department.
Yep, I'm gonna go ahead and stand back here because I am cool on that today.
Same.
But yeah, so I think that peer aspect, it's just it's so heavy, and for all those who listen and are listening to this, one thing that I will say is, we're not here to just talk about what is wrong, but the biggest thing is to help provide context and help you formulate your own solution for your own thing that you're working with. Let's not even call them issues, because they're situations, right? I think life right now is different than it's ever been.
It's just a big issue.
Yeah, right.
After issue after issue.
Right. But I also feel like now we have some of the best ways to connect, like although social media is definitely partly a detriment, it is also a great tool to stay connected, with these cell phones and these many computers that we carry around in our pockets, to be able to pick up the phone and just call your people, check on your people, provide that perspective, and sit down and have these conversations where sometimes having that conversation and making sure or feeling like you're not the only person that feels like this is good enough to keep you going,
right?
I
think there's two sides to that, right? Like, I think peers are an untapped resource. One, that's going to come back again to leadership, because how you're pushing your peers out, if you're giving them the training they needed and all that stuff. If they're not trained and they're people that talk junk, or you got to have trust in your peer,
right?
So you can't just have anybody be a peer.
Sure.
So that's the first thing, but it's an untapped resource, and I think the FOP did a study, and it's overreaching. That's the number one resource that officers typically go to, which it makes sense, because I might go reach out to you because I know you've been there, done that, right?
Right.
So there's that aspect of it, but the other aspect is having somebody outside the department to talk to, or outside of your field, like having that support system. Because one of the things that over time, and we'll talk about this too, but like even with myself, over time, I found a way to kind of isolate.
Yeah.
Like when I first moved to North Carolina, I was playing basketball in a league, and I was hanging out with people that weren't police officers. Then shit happened. Everybody hates the police. I'm like, well, I don't want to hang out with you either. And you lose friends that way too. And family. Like I don't talk to my family back home. But those things happen over time, and you find yourself only with police, which could be good and bad in different situations. Or you find yourself you don't want to be around anybody because you're around people all day, solving everybody's problems and all that. So, but having somebody that doesn't necessarily need to understand, but can support you as well.
Right.
That's a big form of resilience, is having that support system. Yes. Not just taking it all by yourself.
And I think that's another key thing that you hit on is, for all my people who were paying attention to what,
if you're still listening,
for what my sister just said, I know, speaking from personal experience, that it is key to have friends outside of your profession. And it does a lot of different things for you when you do that. Or, even family members or whomever you use, but have somebody to provide an outside perspective. That way because we can get into this groupthink mindset, right? Mm-hmm. Because we all are a part of this culture, this society, this secret fraternity, sorority, brotherhood, sisterhood.
That's a blue line.
Oh, dun dun dun. But you kind of, I've even seen it with myself. You get roped into, people just really don't understand what you are going through, and it took me, it's an ebb and flow. Like I had that part where, I've been in touch with the streets my whole life, so I can always get back to talking to the people that can keep me humble. But when I'm talking to them, now I have a different perspective. I'm like, yo, do you like know how ignorant this sounds right now? And it has caused me to have like friction or hard conversations where it's like, dang, maybe I do want to isolate and, just stick with the people that know,
like me,
right, that think, you know what I'm saying? But you have to fight that urge, because what those people do, like, shout out to my brothers that provide this perspective for me. And when we have those conversations, they say, hey, Court, but what about this? What does this look like in comparison? And then I educate them from a different perspective, that because I say this all the time, like I used to think exactly like that. Mm-hmm. Before I took my oath and joined a police department, I was like, man, there's no way that these cops get it, And then you start meeting more police officers that are like you. Like you and I come from two different geographical regions, right. Two different backgrounds, but very similar. You know what I'm saying? Like it helps, I think, in a sense, because now we have that perspective to provide to those people who don't do what we do.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest disconnects and misconceptions when we talk about police and community too. Like, who becomes police officers? Yeah. It's not typically like your Wall Street guy, right? Yeah, unless the economy crashes and you need a job. But typically it's folks that either have military background or they are coming to help people because they've been through stuff themselves. Yep. So, and you see that in the military too. So you know what I mean? You got. We'll talk about ACEs and all that stuff in another show. But like, I really think that if you ask all police officers at the beginning of, before they become one, you give them that ACE survey, you're going to have a good amount of people with high ACEs. Easy. And for you guys that don't know what ACEs are, it's adverse childhood experiences. So shit happened when you're a kid. Exactly. But I think that in understanding that, like you have officers that have been through stuff, and then you have community that's been through stuff, and they just butt heads thinking they're not, like
same. It's not the same.
Yeah. So, and we can get more into that too, but I guess to take that to the next step too, like if you have officers that have ACEs and that, people that have been hurt or are trying to help, come into this profession, why would you not have support and education in your department to kind of cushion that, right? Because if you have people here, so like with ACEs, 4 or higher, you're more prone to depression, anxiety, all that kind of stuff, heart disease, all that stuff. Right. All the stuff that kills us from this job anyway, right? So if we know that, why are we not educating people on the front end saying, hey, this is a very serious risk of this job, that you can get depression, symptoms of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and you might die young because the stress of it. If we're not offering that, and then we're not offering internal resources to support that, you're doing a disservice to your people.
So let me say this though, don't you think that will be a deterrent? Like when you see, I think me, right, as a 20, I got here in the city or in my department when I was 20 or 21, right?
Too young.
As a 20 or 21-year-old kid, right, you're like, yo, if you tell me like, yo, you probably gonna die like 5 years after
if you don't take care of yourself.
Indeed, but at 20 or 21, all I'm hearing is
I'm gonna go out.
I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna die in 5 years after I'm done. And I'm like, ooh.
And I don't think you need to necessarily approach it that way, because, I mean, you can tell an alcoholic you're gonna die, and it doesn't stop them from drinking, right?
Indeed.
Indeed. I think it's just more the education piece. Like, hey, these are risks of this job, but if you do A, B, C, D, E, and you ask for help and you have that support system, you're gonna be you can recover from pretty much anything. It's not PTSD is not a death sentence.
Right.
It's now they want to call it, people call it PTSD, growth instead of disorder, because you
Fire.
can, you can
Fire.
recover from it. But,
Sure.
Having that education support though, like if you don't have it, what are you expecting from your people?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I do think that it is a tough predicament when you want to talk about, again, leadership, and I know this will be a different topic, but they have so many different things to deal with, that we on the ground don't know about. And I think it's hard because I think the issue in my perception will be that disconnect or that lack thereof communication, that lack thereof transparency. Because I think from the the boots perspective, like the on the ground, you can only assume if you don't know, right? You can only take the things that you see and formulate your own opinions. And granted, everything isn't for us to know, especially in the military.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I'm in basic, your MTIs for my Air Force people or your drill sergeants will tell you what you need to know. They will direct. Like, that's one thing I appreciated and didn't like as going in as an older person in the military is your life and your day-to-day was so structured that you didn't even have to think for yourself, really. It's point you in a direction, you go here, and then when you ask why, we don't need to know why right now. But I think when you talk about growing and having that trust in any type of profession, we're not, like I said, this all isn't just for military and police. I'm talking teachers. I'm talking if you were at Microsoft or Amazon or whatever, you want to be able to have some type of dialogue to know you're giving your life to these people. You're giving your life to this company, this business, this entity, and you would like to know, just to have some type of insight on the direction that you are heading, the direction that this company is heading, and then the things that you need from them to sustain. You just want to be heard, and I think that's one of the biggest things too. When you talk about having that outlet, having that peer things, because then your leadership becomes your peers,
Yeah, and I think when you talk about trust, I think that's one of the bigger issues is you don't trust your leadership. Like, you played sports.
Yeah.
You've had a bunch of different coaches.
Shout out to Page Pirates High School.
I'm going to say shout out to Tracon McMillan and Omar McMillan, my college coaches. But, like, I would run through a damn wall for those people. Like, of course, I remember one time I did question her, and she grabbed me up on my jersey. if she ever listens, if she hears it. But I asked, why aren't you playing Tierra? And she grabbed me, and she's like, "That's none of your business." And I didn't get it then, right? But like at the same time, I had so much trust in her as a coach that
you didn't have to get it.
I didn't have to get it, but like anytime Shannon run, okay,
yeah,
Yeah. But when you have leadership now, and there is no transparency, and they aren't telling you, and they don't, again, there are things that they're not supposed, their focus is community politics, all that stuff too, but like you have to give something to get something back, and your people have to trust you. If there's no trust, that's why you see like 3 people a day are leaving or something. You see numbers across the country, just police departments, they're putting up all these, hey, we'll give you $7,000 signing bonus. Well, what are you doing for the folks here?
Right.
Like what's the retention benefit of staying anymore? So, and that, that like trust, leadership, all that, building on the folks that are there doing the job, because they're your best recruiters.
Right.
If they're not happy, they're not going to tell anybody to come work here.
Right.
Other than they just want somebody on the shift so they don't have to answer all the calls.
Yeah.
But like, come on.
But I and to piggyback off of that, and again, like I said, we're not gonna beat this horse, but I do appreciate the aspects of leadership that you and I both have experienced that have been phenomenal. We both have mentors, past and present, that wear uniforms, that are phenomenal. And honestly, the majority of them are phenomenal. Like, I can say that from my experience that I've had. And the more things that I hear about doing like trainings with people from, other agencies or other jobs, talking to my family members who are dealing with different supervisor issues. I'm like, yo, a lot of us have the same issues, and a lot of us look at things in a very similar perspective. And then there's a lot of heroes that are in leadership that help you get through those moments, But my question is, let's remove leadership from the conversation, right? What do you do to help yourself sustain mentally, physically, emotionally while you're going through these scenarios? Because like last night, for example, I just had a conversation with my neighbor. He's in the car sales business, and he's talking about how they're adjusting the schedule now to where they're working every Sunday. And I'm like, ooh, that's tough. And he's like, for us, that's,
normal.
Yeah, whatever. Holidays, whatever. But for somebody who isn't or has not experienced that, now it's one of those things where his group of peers are at the dealership, and they're like, yo, what are we going to do? Like, so what do you do when because who knows what that decision is based off of, right? Who knows? It's like, all right, maybe the company is falling behind. We need to pick up, or maybe it's not. Maybe this is, who knows? But if they're not going to communicate that, now what is it that you do or we do for those of us who are left to deal with whatever decisions that are being made from the top?
It's the question of the day, man.
Yeah, I know.
And I think that's one of the bigger issues is, everyone is always like, you can't stress about stuff you can't control. Mm-hmm. But in this job, the things you can't control impact your life, health, and safety. Sure. So it's such a tough question to ask, because that's what everybody says. Like, oh, just don't focus on things you can't control. Right. Focus on these and set small goals and do all this stuff.
Right.
It's easier said than done.
Sure.
It's doable.
Right.
Like you can become that person like, fuck it, I'm just coming to work. I'm going to collect my paycheck. I'll answer my calls, but I'm not going to be proactive. And you're seeing that more. And people are looking at more as a job than a career.
Right.
But that's just such a hard question to answer, because, if you don't have anything to focus on outside of this job, be it family or going to school or a hobby or, anything like that, and all you're doing is here, you kind of set yourself up for failure in that session.
Yep.
But like, if you are going to school and you're like, hey, this is my goal, I want to, I want to focus on these things, you can kind of take your mind off that stuff. But then there's still that looming, the decisions being made.
Yeah. But see, I think what you just said is the biggest key, because since the beginning of time and until the end of time, I think that's going to happen, You're going to have to deal with that. So I think having that established something else, like when you talk about addicts, the name of the podcast, obviously it's a A.T.T.I.C, but we talk about addiction, addict, like get addicted to something that is productive for you. Cooking. I was listening to a podcast the other night about a Army Ranger who he had did his time in a tour in Afghanistan, and his Ranger unit, they just happened to be the same time as Pat Tillman, and I was talking to you about this earlier, and for those who don't know, you can look up this. But anyway, what he was saying was, after all was said and done, right, he gives this amazing story about all the things that they had to do, all the things he saw, he witnessed and experienced, but afterwards he's like, hey, I just wanted to get out. I wanted to get away from it. So he got out, right? But he gets out and he gets addicted to opiates. And now he's battling addiction, and that's a whole nother conversation that we'll have later on. But he's battling addiction, and eventually he surrounded, met a nice lady who was able to help him and provide him perspective and context. And he started doing different things. He didn't explain it to a T, but basically what he got to was that he transformed his addiction to something positive, to where he's doing school. So now he's, focused on his work, trains jiu-jitsu. So now those are the things that have led him away from what was a tough situation for him when he was dealing with all the stressors and stuff like that from the organization that he was a part of. So my biggest thing for those who are listening is, again, like I said, we will talk about the things that initiate and thought provoke, so that you can look at your life and restructure things accordingly to help you succeed. Because I plan on doing my whole 30 in my career, you know what I mean? And I love the department that I'm with. I've got, I've got very little negative experiences. And I want those who are going to into any profession to have a perspective of the things that have helped people like you and I, because you and I have hung out outside of work, like there's things that we had, the bond that we've built is outside of policing, and that's the thing I think is lacking for a lot of people in their work environment, because the reality is we spend most of our time working. The majority of your work, where you think how many hours you put in, let's just call it a standard 40, right? But we know in any given day on any different career, that goes to 45, 50, 60, whatever that looks like for you, especially those who are single parents, working 2 jobs, trying to provide for X amount of kids. Like, I've seen that struggle wholeheartedly, where my mother is working holidays and it's just me and my little brother, and we figuring it out. And I'm making grilled cheeses for us to sustain on, beanies and weenies. So I'm saying all that to say there has to be some type of outlet. Like, what you, and I'm asking this to the public, what is it that you do that makes you happy? What is it that you do that's outside of your job, outside of your career, And it gets hard when
it does.
You deal with those. You come home and you have just as much stress at home than you do.
Well, I think, remember in class, Courtney and I taught a resilience class together, and we'll probably talk about that sometime too. But the question at the very end, when I made everybody shut their eyes and draw a picture of themselves at their best, at their happiest, and then finding a way to bring that into their day to day. Which, when we talk about addicts, I think a lot of folks that do this job are addicted to, maybe not, well, some are addicted to the job, but like you're addicted to the way that you do the job, because it becomes how you're safe, right? So like, you don't get, like all the guys, I don't get bothered about stuff. I don't take stuff home. Okay. You put it in your attic. You just stored it for later, right?
Exactly.
And again, some people are fucking miracle workers and they just are good, right? Like I can't explain it. They're just genetically different, I guess. But like everybody, at some point that stuff comes up.
Sure.
It comes out. But like you're addicted to how you do things day to day because it keeps you safe. So like that, and I think that's where, when I think it's hard to not focus on those things that you can't control, it's because that impacts how you do
control things.
Like outer carrier vest. It's out of people's control because it's not their individual. Well, it is now if you go sign up and try to. But it's like stuff like that, because it does impact your health. How many people have had back and hip surgery? Sure. Right, because the belt, for years everybody's known like that shit's heavy as hell. Yeah. And it's not good for you. And you're sitting in the car and getting up and all that. So like things like that, like you can't control it, but like it impacts your health long term. Right. So like you will focus on it. So some stuff you just can't push aside, and having those outlets is great, and I think you need to have it. 100% recommend it, because like how many people wear the uniform for their job, just the 40 hours a week, but then they're working off duty 7 days of the week, right? Like on top of this shift, because for whatever reason, people wear the uniform too much, and that's detrimental too, because for so many different reasons.
People that are listening to this, if you're still here with us,
if we haven't
if we haven't ran you off just yet, those who, and it's not just for the uniform, if you are, everybody's got this hustler mentality, right? And I get it, because that was me. I was the dude that was getting off of work, going to work, and on my off days, I'm working. You know what I mean? So it was like, yo, I gotta get it. And then I started doing things like getting the full blood panel a year. And then for those who can't see me, I just went to the doctor a couple days ago. 5'9" tall. You know what I'm saying? I'm real tall. 154 pounds. So I just want y'all to know I'm a specimen, right? But when I got my blood work back and I was looking at, or when I got my blood pressure taken and I'm looking at it and my blood pressure is a little high. I'm thinking like, I'm normally like a 120 over 70 and I'm like 130 over 80, 130 over 90. And I'm like, holy shit. And I'm like, yo, I don't look like what my body is producing. So then I get a blood panel done. And I'm saying that because it's like, okay, now we're starting to talk about those health impacts, right? Those stressors, those, how much of it is having, oh, speaking of which, sorry, I guess I didn't get to this, but I have a kid, another kid coming. Yeah, you know what I mean? So like how much of it is life stressors because you go from doing that job, right? Whatever job it is, like I said, it doesn't have to be policing, but you go from that job and now like, shoot, I got kids to take care of. I got to make extra money. So you go work extra. Then you get home and you take care of a wife or a husband and you take care of kids. And then you start looking around and you're like, dang, where's my time to sleep?
Where's my time to have that hobby that we
exactly. Where's my, you start looking at I just want the basic necessities. And then, so you have to make it a priority in a way. And I'll give you an example of the way that's looked like for me, right? So I work during the day, right? And let's say on my off days, I'll do things to where if the kid is at daycare, or let's say a weekend where you don't have daycare, let's just say a day-to-day person, and you don't have that, find a resource that you can use, in your area, like whether that's family that you can say, hey, can you just give me a couple hours to sit with the kid? Or if you are married, your significant other, like, hey, this weekend I'm gonna stay and I'm gonna sit here with, the dog. I'm gonna sit here with the kid, and I'm gonna do things. You just go out, and some of that money that you are making, save $10 here, $5 here, and eventually you save up enough for a massage. I'm gonna go get a massage for a day. I'm gonna go do something to treat myself, and eventually you start setting habits and developing things that can help you deal with those stressors. Again, like you were saying, it's going to impact you one way or another. Like, you're going to feel it one way or another, no matter where you are, what career field you're in, what you do. But you also can't sit there and say, woe is me. You know what I mean? Like, you have to do something about it. Or if not, you're going to fall into that pit that we talk about, And for you, like I'll tell you, like I've told you before, like I'm proud of you for making the moves and the steps that you've taken, because there's so many people that have been there in their career field and just been like, you know what, I'm comfortable. I'm addicted to my day-to-day. And now,
well, and not even addicted, scared to do something else because you don't think you can. Yeah. I think one of the downfalls of this profession is you think it's all you can do. You don't realize how truly marketable you are to be able to go do other things, But I'm going to go back to something you said a little while ago about your blood panel.
Uh-oh.
And health. I think, too, that that's where we come back to education. So at the end of the day, we are all responsible for ourselves. The chief doesn't tuck you in bed at night, right? Right. You have to make the decisions to do the things for you that are best for you every day. But certain things should be provided by police departments and fire departments and schools. Wherever you work, if your job is known to cause certain things, it should be provided for you the resources to help that, right?
Right.
So education. You should have education to know that if your blood pressure is high, if you have indigestion all the time, if you're not sleeping, if you're angry all the time, there's something to that. It's not, you don't just take a pill and everything's okay.
Right.
There's a reason why these things are happening. And a lot of folks don't know that. And a lot of folks don't know that some of this stuff is associated with depression and anxiety. And then if you're a man, fuck no, I don't have that, right? I'm a warrior.
Right.
But I think, and I just had to write a paper on this, but there's so many things that go into underdiagnosis of things, and it's culture, it's stigma and all that. It's people, they don't want to be seen as weak. And but you're not weak. you know, and if
Right.
you had that education and know like these things are associated, you can make more informed decisions in your health to be able to do better stuff, right? So having a qualified professional at your department, and when you talk about leadership, and like the chief's role is what the chief's role is, right? And he shouldn't have to worry about
Or she.
Da, da, da. Yeah, we need more female chiefs, right? But their job is not to know every single person in the department, every single officer.
Of course.
Especially like larger departments. But having the right people in the right place to tackle that stuff is what's important. So having a behavioral health specialist or a psychologist or whatever you want to call them that is qualified,
Right.
that has been trained,
Right.
that has supervision themselves, you know, like they can't just come in here and do it and not have somebody looking over them.
For
You
sure.
know what I mean? Because
Checks and balances
yeah,
for
exactly.
everything.
But somebody that's qualified, that understands this profession and can educate people, and you know what I mean, like
Right,
the system, like
right.
you have to have that stuff in place. You can't expect to, you know, like, well, you guys, you have health insurance, so you should be able to just go find somebody and use your insurance, right? Well, here's the issue with that, Courtney. There are not a lot of first responder certified therapists out there, and a lot of them aren't taking insurance anymore because insurance isn't paying. And they might be booked because everybody and their mom
Right.
is on the mental health bus. And
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right. Which is good.
Yeah.
Shout out to everybody
get
in
your
their mom.
help. But but you know what I mean? Like there's so much wrapped into it that having the correct person, you know, that one, your people trust, two, you as a leader actually talk to and let them make the decisions and create the program and all that stuff, because they actually know what they're talking about, not you. You
Right.
know, like I think that's another issue, and we're going to talk about leadership again, but like just being able to, what's the word when you let other people do stuff?
Like when you're giving somebody else passing
yeah.
the ball, give somebody else
yeah.
the ability to.
Whatever.
All right.
You
I
know
get
what I'm
what
talking
you're
about.
saying. I get what you're saying.
But you're giving them the responsibilities.
Okay. Delegate.
Delegate, yes. I knew it started with a D. But you're giving them the responsibilities to do their job that they're the expert in.
Right.
We don't that needs to happen more, right? And then that is less burden on the leader too, because they should be able to trust that person to do their job.
Yes.
And that person should trust their leader to be able to do the job that they can do, right? And I think building that up and building that internal support and structure, you change the culture. And at the end of the day, that's what needs to happen, is there needs to be a culture change.
And I think that's across the board with every entity, every business, everybody who has an organization should always be willing to revitalize, revamp, you know, to look at things from a different perspective.
Just listen.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it goes back to what we're talking about in the beginning, because again, these are all things that impact the mental health aspect, you know, or the physical health
there's the
aspect,
wellness
or
aspect,
you know,
yeah.
all of the above. And just all overall happiness, man. Like, you just want to enjoy life. Like, that's one thing that I always try to impart on people where I'm around. Like, I don't want anybody not to laugh around me. Like, if you were around me, you were gonna laugh at some point in our conversation.
Looking at you.
Exactly. That's how I'm like, listen, believe you me, if we are all on the elevator and nobody knows each other and we're just standing there and the elevator gets stuck, y'all get ready for a comedy show, because we gonna know everything about each other by the time we get off of that, you know? And I think that's, you know, the mindset, when you talk about even just a warrior mindset or whatever the case is, but having that mindset to be bold enough to band and try to have those conversations with the people who can affect that change. I know it's easier said than done. And then, you know, for those who will listen, that have the ability to make those changes, be willing to listen. Just be open, you know, open enough to have that conversation to where you can start implementing those things.
I think, yeah, that's kind of where that culture change needs to come, because you have people in those positions that know this information, you know, but having the confidence to be able to kind of go out and speak on a limb, you know, like, I'm not there. I can't make change there. I can yell outside all I want, you know what I mean? But if people internally are not doing what they need to do for themselves or for the people under them, nothing's going to change.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah.
I think if we go on that whole things aren't going to change topic, and things don't change, you're going to continue to see people leave.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not just this profession. It's like after COVID, you saw professions across the board. People were just, nobody was working. Everybody collected a little unemployment check. And but if we're talking about this profession and things don't change, like there are some departments right now that are just not sustainable because of how they're operating their department. Like if they're not focusing on the people that are there actively working, you know, the boots on the ground, if they're not focusing on their wellness, they're not, you know, you can buy a helicopter, right? And I love helicopters. I love Snoopy. I'm going to give a shout out to Snoopy. But like there's such a vital part of the day-to-day function of police, right? Like they provide eyes up in the sky. Like there's so many things that they do that the job just wouldn't be the same without them, right? But a helicopter requires maintenance.
Right.
You know, the cars, they require maintenance. And we're constantly bringing the cars in for checkups and all this kind of stuff. You know, who knows how much maintenance is on a helicopter. But if you're not doing that for your people, you know, if you're not providing that maintenance for your people, if you're not doing, like, work out on duty. Why can't you? Firefighters get to. Because it's built into their contract. Why isn't, being fit and being able to do the job is a part of the police description, right? But like if you're, and you should be doing that on your own too. But like, if we go back to talking about, you go home and you got kids, you know, or you're working off duty after your shift. Like when do you have time to work out? But being able to work out on duty with your shift, one, it's team building. Two hours, 3 to 4 hours after you work out, your stress level is low, your brain functioning is high. Like why would you not want that? Your officers to be at their optimal capacity, you know what I mean? So, you know, just little things, but if we're not changing the culture and you're not focusing on the people that are inside, it's not sustainable. If you're not focusing on mental health and making that a priority, it's not sustainable, because what's going to happen when all your people leave, or you got people just going crazy out there? Hopefully that doesn't happen. But, you know, it's unsafe for the community. You know, and we're not talking about that aspect of it. Like 4th of July in Charlotte, if you watch any of the videos on the news and all that kind of stuff, you know, I had people call me and say, I'm so glad you're not an officer anymore, because I was down there with my kids and I'm never going back to Charlotte again. It was insane. They were throwing fireworks at the police officers and they were doing this and they're doing that. And it was just the scariest thing I've ever seen. That's from a civilian, right? Like we see that stuff too much, unfortunately. But, you know, the message that was delivered after that was everything's fine. You know, everything was fine. The police had it all under control. We had 40 plus arrests, blah, blah, blah. We had a plan and we put the plan in place. You know, like that's the message that's always delivered. Everything's okay. But it's not okay. They didn't have enough people, you know, like they weren't prepared for that situation. And you watch the videos and you can see that. You talk to officers and you can hear that, you know. But it's stuff like that you're going to see more and more and more happens. We can go into conspiracies of the election year and riots and everything, you know. But if it's conspiracy or not, but you know what I mean. But like, there's stuff that's going to happen, and it's not sustainable to keep putting your people through this and not providing support. And you're going to keep losing folks, and again, in turn, it's truly not safe for your community.
And I think the other half of that is you try, you know what I mean? Like you try to do the best you can with what you have. But what do you have, you know? And the fact of the matter is there's not a lot of people just applying to this profession as much as it used to be. That's what you know, what my guess would be. I'm not into the analytics or all the numbers, but there's only but so much we have to work with, you know, at the end of the day. And this is everywhere across America. You know, this isn't. It's not even just policing. Like teachers. You
But
know,
be honest about it.
yeah, no, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think again that goes back to that communication, But then, what does that look like? You know, what does that transparency look like when you talk about giving things like that to a community? What does it say like when you are on the news saying, "Yo, we don't have enough. We can't do enough. Good luck." You know what I mean?
I mean,
What you know what I'm
they
saying?
kind of feel that way anyway.
Yeah,
So
what-
like,
You know, I think it's hard too, though, because at some point in time, you want to say, we doing the, you know, maybe we're doing the best for what we got. You know what I'm saying?
that would be a better approach than what's been done.
And I think, you know, again, it's just hard. It's hard to gauge that because as, you know, as a boots on the ground person, you see what you see. Like, you know what you know. You know what I'm saying? And you have insight that you can provide context to those who are on the outside, who are like the example you were talking about, people hitting you up like, hey, I'm never bringing my, you know. And I tell people this all the time. I say like, hey, if you watch social media, if you watch TV and you watch the news, blah blah blah, you're gonna formulate your opinion based off of the things that you're being shown, you know. And again, it's nobody's fault, but you know, people have things to do. Like, you have ratings to make, you have things, you know, there's stuff that is more interesting to look at. But another thing that I provide for people is dig a little bit deeper into some of the other underlying things that you can look at to say, all right, you know what? Albeit it is tough and it's shitty, like, I can see where you play devil's advocate. You say, all right, I can see there's good in this situation. So therefore, when you have those people that listen to you, that are in the decision-making levels, they can say, all right, well, you're not just butting heads with me. Like, yes, I agree that there is progress in these areas, but what we can't do is throw the mask or put a Band-Aid over a broken arm and to make this look like, hey, everybody down here is fine when it's not. And then you start leading into a bunch of different things that's going to escalate into probably the next thing that we'll jump on. Because when you start getting a bunch of things compounding on you, whether it's organizational, external, family, all of these stressors start building up, and you don't have that outlet, or you don't feel like there's anything going to change or anything going to come, then you start getting into things like suicide. You know, you start getting into that mindset of like, well, if this is how it's going to be forever, I've been dealing with it. This is the cycle that I'm stuck in. I can't find anything to break it, so I'll break it myself, you know? And I think that's another, you know, a heavy, heavy topic when you talk about first responders. You talk about the families of the first responders. You talk about those who are in military. You know, this is a whole different, you know, podcast session in itself. But from your perspective, you know, you're getting your doctorate degree. And as a matter of fact, you want to tell people what you're getting your doctorate degree in?
Traumatology.
You did say that. Sorry. My bad. You know, that's what happens when you do it. But
too much. Yeah.
Traumatology, when you talk about that, so now you have an insight from a doctor level perspective. Listen, you better wear it. For y'all that couldn't see, she made a little face. I'm like, y'all better stop playing this Dr. Shannon Finnis right here. But the insight that you've been getting from the studying that you've been doing, you know, like at the end of this, you are going to have certification that says you are an expert in traumatology. That's what that says. There's no higher level than a doctor. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, when you look at the climate of this culture and you look at it comparatively with other professions, and, you know, you combine the military and you talk about that trauma, that building, where do you see it at now and comparing to the past, and where do you see it going? Where do you see it heading?
That's kind of an interesting question because, like, when I started in 2013, It is not the same as 2023.
Right.
There's definitely, and I'm gonna guess that it's national, right? Because everything that's been going on in the world has been going on everywhere.
Right.
But you've seen a huge decline in morale in police officers just because, you know, the state of the world's unstable anyway.
Yes.
But the politics and courts and, you know, like, you feel almost ineffective in your job because all the hard work you do walks right out the door before you leave, you know? But just like there's so much in it, and then you had COVID and just the way the world went crazy, and, you know, you saw stuff in 2014 and then again in, 2016 and then in 2020, and we're coming up on 2024, you know? So, you know, like there's so much stuff that impacts it. And like, I'm looking here at bluehelp.org. Shout out to them for they provide suicide numbers for law enforcement.
Blue Help.
So far in 2023, 73. We had 2 in North Carolina in 1 week's time this last month, right? And 199 last year, 190 year before, 194 2020, and 251 in 2019. Oof. 2019, I think you really saw a push for wellness in law enforcement. That's when we started the resilient stuff. And, you know, like, you really saw a push for wellness. So, like, it's out there and people are talking about it. Even when I started my degree, my focus was on kids.
Right.
And my instructor told me to switch to law enforcement. She's like, it's a hot topic. You need to jump on that.
Right.
You know, and it is, and everybody's talking about it. But at the same time, like, they're talking about it, but what are they doing about it? And some departments are doing phenomenal things, you know, but some aren't. And I'm wondering, you know, if it's like a liability issue. Like, one, people are afraid to say anything's wrong because they don't want to lose their job.
Right.
But 2, if somebody says, hey, I'm struggling, I got this going on.
Right.
And then they go get help because you can, and you can be okay.
Right.
But now they look at you as a liability. So, like, if anything ever happens, oh, well, maybe we should have let them go because they said, you know. So would higher ups in HR rather not know that they got all these people walking around with whatever? Right. Or would you rather know and be able to help them? You know, and that's the side of the coin there. But it's such a hard time because while wellness is a hot topic and everybody's talking about it, there's still departments not doing jack shit about it.
Yeah.
Or the wrong stuff.
And I think that right there in itself, the thing about it, like, when you're internal, you don't know what you don't know, you know? So, like, for those of us that are, you know, intertwined in the network of the systems, we see our day-to-day, you know? We're going about our day-to-day, our jobs, our lives, and you're not paying attention to that outside stuff that hey, I don't need to even focus on whatever I'm dealing with right now because I got to get it, you know? I got to get this check. Whenever I get this check, I have to provide for whomever or whatever I'm providing for to sustain my life. And at some point in time, you don't even know to even check on yourself, you know?
Well, even I'll add to that is you're going call to call because you got, 4 on a shift, 3 on a shift sometimes. And we'll talk about Charlotte. Over 1 million, close to 1 million people live here. You maybe have 700 officers on patrol. And then you split that across 13 divisions and 3 shifts. Like, that's not sustainable. That's not okay. It's not safe. So you're going call to call, and people have been doing some crazy shit lately. You know, like the last few years, there's been some really messed up stuff going on in Charlotte. But, you know, you go to all these things and you put that shit in your attic and you don't think about it. And you just, you know, and like even, you know, you might have a philosophy for your department where you don't bring the next call with you. How's that possible when you have to go call and you don't have a break to decompress, or you don't have somebody in your department to talk to, you know, or you don't have the education to know, like, hey, how I'm feeling right now is normal. It's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Like, it just comes back to having all those resources, having that support, having that leadership to truly be a sustainable department, but sustainable in your longevity too. Like, stop.
I think it's so tough, because again, it piles up. But my challenge for those who are listening, especially if that is you in that situation and you hear this, like things that you have to do, small things that move you on to the next, like I recall doing debriefs after a big call with just the senior officers, and not just the senior officers, but the senior officers are the ones who are like, hey, everybody meet XYZ just for a second. We talk about it, things that could go better, things that could have happened, and then everybody's on one accord. And reach out to those people that if you're feeling some type of way, there has to be somebody else feeling that, because y'all are all are experiencing these calls and stuff together. For my medics and my teachers and stuff, y'all are getting somebody, especially if there's a rotating group of kids or a rotating area that you're working, y'all are all experiencing this stuff together. So it's gonna take, if it's not happening organizationally at wherever you're at this point in time, you have to be able to pull from each other, from whatever you have, you have to be able to lean on another shoulder. That's why, I'm forever grateful for all of those who have poured into my life, that have pulled me to the side, like, yo, you good? Like, what's going on? And I'm the type of person where I don't really like to talk about much, like if it's not funny, we don't need to talk about it, but at the same time, even if they don't, just knowing somebody checked on you is enough to keep you going to that next, to make it feel like you're just not alone out here. Because when you talk about suicide, it's one of those things, and I hear, us as police officers say it all the time, like, nobody understands. You don't understand that,
But you're not willing to talk about it either.
Right.
And let somebody understand.
That's a fact. Yeah. Especially in military too, man. Like, I'm in the Air Force. All right, this is not even not even close to being a, SEAL, Navy SEAL. You know what I mean? Like, aircraft mechanic. So if I am an aircraft mechanic, I'm not gonna have those same experiences as someone who's doing spec ops. So to their point, like, I don't.
Right.
I don't. But like you were saying, if you aren't willing to talk about it, if not me, somebody, find somebody to have that communication piece. And then even further than that, meditate, Like, for me, meditation isn't just sitting with your legs crossed with, Buddha in the background and, some waterfall or something like that. Like, exactly. For me, I could be listening to a podcast, washing the dishes, and that's meditation. I tell people, and that's something I want to be a takeaway from today is, yes, while we are talking about the things that is on everyone's mind, the things that are our stressors, and this isn't a one day, one night fix for anybody. This has been happening for years, long before everybody who was listening to this podcast has been here, and there will be things to fix long after. But if we start having the dialogue about it now and start providing certain things that people can do, like even the small things, that's why I just, with this being addicts, store these things in your attic. Store taking some time to holler at your boy, you know what I'm saying? Talk to a coworker, talk to your girl, or whomever it is. And if you don't want to have the communication, so be it. Find some peace and solace. Shout out, find my peace. But find that peace in having the thing you do. Go train, go lift weights. If you like, shooting at targets, go do that. Archery, paint, like all these different things. Start a podcast. All these different things for outlets that you can do, you have to do them, because in the midst of trying to solve these issues or situations that we are going to be dealing with, you have to do those things to sustain you while going forward, which is why now I can lower my blood pressure back down to 120/70, and be smooth in that aspect.
Don't be that person that says I used to. Yeah. I used to do this, I used to do that, and find time to spend with your family.
Yeah.
Family first. There's too many people that we've talked to over the years in the class that, they 3 divorces or, I didn't even get to watch my kids grow up because I was always at work.
Yep.
Don't be that person.
Yeah.
The job, while it's an honorable profession, it has always been and will be as long as you hold true to being an honorable person. Like,
exactly.
Don't be that guy. But, it is an honorable profession, but, like, at the same time, it's what you do. It's not who you are.
Yes.
And you have to really separate that. I was terrible at that. And we're getting kind of long though. But
hey, give it up. Don't worry, we'll dive into that at another session. You know what I mean?
Shannon, like that was who I was. Another time.
Yes.
But yeah, you have to be able to separate who you are from what you do. We're terrible about that in this profession, in this country in general. But,
yes. And that's across the board, yo. So I appreciate you, gangster. You know what I'm saying? Cool. Like it's, for an opening podcast, I think we did pretty well.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what they say.
I was scared to say.
But yeah, feel free to reach out and give us ideas to talk about. Guests that we should have on, any suggestions?
Yes. We will be having guests. We will be having different, topics. This is just the initial kind of overview of things. What we're going to be doing. But believe you me, for everybody who, takeaways from this, again, we're not here. There's no air quotes disgruntledness about anything that is going on. You know what I mean? There is 100% love and passion because we love the people who we have encountered. We love all of things that come with, the profession of policing, the first responder
service.
That in general, which is why we just want to have this as an outlet, and for everybody that will listen to this, we love y'all, again, no animosity, no hate towards anybody, towards anything, just real talk.
Yeah. And if you're struggling with anything, please feel free to reach out to us. Check out the website. We'll have resources on there. Don't want to list them all here.
Yeah, no. We'll
just check out the website. All the things I couldn't say.com. There's a resource page on there. And we'd be happy to help connect you with someone or just even listen if that's what you need.
All right. Until next time.
All right, Court.
Yeah.
Problems and I fixed it. Got my mind spinning, I feel dizzy. Cause some people love, now they miss me. I've been feeling low, I gotta hit save. I've been feeling low, I gotta hit save. A little time on my mind, let me find my peace. Write a hook in a book and rewind the beat. Little time on my mind, let me find my peace. Write a hook in my book to rewind the beat and rewind the beat.